much of this I can get in. Okay, so it's mostly there. I was going to try to get it so that you guys could see the whole page, but let's see if I can get higher. Okay, it's not too bad. All right, so I'm going to do this in pencil, and what I thought I would show you is just how I go about getting the image. I'm trying to square it so it doesn't look too funky. I wanted to show you guys how I will go about kind of organizing the drawing of the pears. So if you want to do it with me, you can. And so what I've got up is I've got the pear picture up right now, and it's a vertical picture. So I could actually go this way and do it, but what I think I'm going to do instead is I think I'm just going to kind of organize my drawing this way. And in doing so, what I'd like to do is I want to figure out, first off, is where things go. So if I'm looking at the picture of the pear, and here, let me do this because I'm going to make some kind of preliminary lines just using my pad here. Sorry, I'm just resizing 1,000 windows on my desktop here. All right. So what I've done is I've created a general shape of a piece of paper. Pretend like these are the edges of the paper. And if I look at the pear drawing or the pear photo that I've put up, what I like to try to do first is try to look at, so if I look at the photo online, I notice that one of the pears, so the most of the pears, if I were to kind of split very lightly my page into fours, right? This is one way that you can kind of identify how to space things. And I look back at my drawing of the pears, I notice that if I do the same kind of thing, I wish I could show you, but if I do the same kind of thing on the photograph, and I put these similar kind of lines on the photograph, or what you could do is on your computer screen, you could just hold up the pencil to the computer screen and give yourself a ballpark orientation of where the stuff is in the photograph itself, and then think about your page or the edges of your page as the edges of the photo that you're looking at, so that you can match more or less the composition or where things go on the page. So where you compose the elements of your drawing, you can actually, if you're copying, as we are doing now with the computer, if you're copying images, one of the things that you can do is just match the edges of the images to the edges of your page. And so what I've done is I'm kind of looking at the photo, and what I've noticed is that around midway of the photo, it looks like there's like the pear is kind of like here. And so look what I'm doing. I'm just barely, you guys can probably barely see it, but I'm just kind of barely kind of putting in some shape, general super light shapes. This is where the gesture process can come in to help. I look at the bowl and I look at how close is the bowl to the edge of the photograph. And I kind of go, well, it's about right about there. It's relatively close. And if you guys want to be really kind of systematic about it, you could even print this thing out and actually create a grid on the photo and a corresponding grid onto your page. So if I look at the photograph, I look at the edge of the bowl, and I look, there's like a pear that's coming up here. Notice that can you guys even see these lines? I'm hoping so, because they're quite light. Because what I'm doing is I'm being really non-committal right now about my subject matter here. And this preliminary sketch is just to try to get the general kind of shape, the general orientation of all of the elements in in the photograph. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but in terms of, so for example, sometimes your page might not actually match the dimensions of the photo that you're trying to draw. But if I can get a starting point, and that's what I'm doing when I'm doing the crisscross, if I can get a starting point and I can get down, say, in the middle, this pear, okay, in the bowl, and I feel like, yeah, I kind of got, that's a pretty, let's say I'm happy with this pear here. Okay, you guys following along? Let's say I feel like that pear right there more or less represents the pear that's in the picture. Okay. Now keep in mind, this is just a super light. I'm barely kind of touching my pencil. I'm just kind of barely touching it. I mean, in terms of like the pressure. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get a general impression of what's on the page. And just like you did with the gesture drawings, um, you guys probably noticed, like at a certain point during the gesture drawings, that you were like, yeah, there's something not quite right about that. But you kind of, at a certain point, you kind of feel like, yeah, I can go back in and I can kind of correct it. So one of the things that I noticed was that there's a pear in the back, and here's this stem. I'm starting to look at relationships in the photograph that I can use as markers or orientation points for my drawing. So for example, if I put this pear down first, and I feel like, okay, there's the pear, I've got the bowl coming around here, it's more or less in the center of the page, and then I can look at that pear that's up above. I'll notice that you see how that top pear right there is coming out of the top of that stem. That's a visual clue for me. So you're a little bit of an investigator. You're kind of like going back in and trying to figure out, where does stuff go, right? So when I do that, here's that. When I do that, that shows me that my original sketch of the little pear over here was a little bit too far over. And so now I can adjust that kind of pointy pear in the back. Okay. I can also look at the line, the kind of trajectory of how the stems line up. And that's going to help me understand whether or not I've done a decent enough job getting those pears onto the page. Up in here, for example, if I look at it's kind of key if you guys are following along to look at the photo while I do this, to kind of get how I'm going about it. So I've noticed that if I'm going to take my original pear here as my core, organizational foundation, then I can start growing my drawing from this. And that's kind of how I work. I don't create multiple spots. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just start with a core, or I'll start with a general sketch. And then once I get the general sketch down and I'm happy with it, then I can start to grow off of that, because I trust that I have the proportions of the pear right. And then I also can trust that if I can get that right, and I can get more or less the placement of the different pears, looking like the photograph, then I'm in good shape. Okay. Now, sometimes the shadows, we end up sort of noticing the actual thing itself, and you'll notice that there's a little bit of a hump down here, which is I think the backside of the bowl. And so if I were to take that bowl, looks like I'm in okay shape on the bowl. Looks like my bowl could go a little bit further over, but there's this little dark bit that is a bridge between this pear and the pear next to it. And so I realized this pear, when I originally scribbled it out, was a little bit too close. And now I can kind of bring it down like this. And then also just little other things, like for example, the bowl itself, it doesn't actually go that far over. So I can get my eraser, and this is where you can start to kind of hone in on the kind of, I guess I would call it like the bones of your drawing, like this is where the refinement begins to come in. Okay. So I am noticing that the bowl intersects that one pear right about there, and then the pear kind of comes around. And I'm going to clean it up. I don't always need all these crazy lines everywhere. All right. So, And in fact, it kind of looks like, I feel like this guy right here could be a little bit stubbier, possibly. Now, again, the point of this assignment is for us to pay attention to the ability to create shadow, what we call value. And the development of value is the development of shadow areas in your drawing that have a nice range from white to very dark, and then also represent the grays. So what I'm going to do here is you'll see that the bowl, oftentimes I oftentimes, well, when I started out drawing, what I ended up doing was I ended up defaulting to what I knew and not what I was seeing. And what that means is that if I were just to draw this bowl without really paying attention to how kind of truncated it is here, I could just have gone in and drawn any old bowl I wanted, because I've seen a million bowls, and most of us have libraries of images in our heads probably. Looks too like down below here, there's another little kind of it's almost like, looks like a colander of some kind. So, and in this case, I'm kind of using my, this, there we go. All right. And then we have this other pair that's down here, and that other pair touches the bottom of that bowl. But if I were to look at, say, the intersection of the pair here and the bowl, and I were to make a straight line down, if I did that on my photograph, I would notice that that pair down below doesn't quite match up to that line. So what I end up doing is I end up looking at the photograph, putting my pencil up on the photograph, and then giving myself an approximation, like how far away from that imaginary line that I just made up, how far away is this pair? And that's just by way of me trying to figure out, where do I put stuff? And that's really what composition is where do you put stuff? And so if I have the photograph, maybe what I can try and do for you guys, I really want you to get this. So let me see if I can print. I want to, oh, I guess not. Give me one sec, guys. I'm going to try to get this into view, because I do want you guys to be able to see, to kind of understand what I'm talking about, because I feel like I'm not. Let's see if I can get this to print from my printer. Bear with me a minute here. Oh, it does screenshot. Give me one sec, guys. I'm going to print this out, and then that way at least we'll have a visual reference here, and then you can see how I'm doing, what I'm doing. So if you think about composition as really a process of figuring out where things go, one of the techniques that I use is creating these sort of false, or not false, but made up trajectories where I can compare and contrast stuff. So if I have stuff sort of laying out in space, like say this pair right here, for me at first, I feel like it gets really lost in the shadows. So once I lay in all this stuff, so here comes my print, you guys. Let's see if I can get this. And then I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay. And you guys can do this too, and it might actually be helpful to either print out the document that you want to draw, or have it up on a screen that's, that you can regularly refer to. Oh, my printer is doing something. So, but when it's done, so now that I've got this kind of in, what I've done is I I noticed that if I were really doing it according to the photo, my page would actually cut off something like right here. I'm just waiting on this print. There, oh my gosh. Turn of the century. Okay, so that's the worst print ever. So here's that is the worst print ever. So here's this print, right? And so here's the top of the page. And so if I were to compare and contrast this, the top of the page, the top of the photo would actually be something like right here, right? And then down below here, here's the bottom of that pear. It would kind of cut off here. Okay. And so what I did before was I made kind of an imaginary line this way, and I made an imaginary line this way. And that allowed me, and if I do the same thing here, you can see I kind of lined it up okay. I was doing it without the benefit of this. You can see that I got it a little bit off based on my original coordinates, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. It is a drawing. And so what I was mentioning before is here's the edge of this pear on my crappy print. And then what I was trying to figure out is how far away is this pear, say, from the bowl? So what I did was I looked at this intersection right here, and then I just made a straight line down, imaginary line, and then I measured this part right here. And that's what I did here on my sketch, is I took that line down, and there's that same space. And so those are the kind of techniques that you can use to figure out where things are going to go in your drawing. So this can be a really handy way of going about it. So now that I got most of the pears in there, I did notice that this pear right here kind of comes down. And I noticed that there's now the next thing I'm going to do, I want to focus on, you guys, are the shadows. So now that we're moving into the more complex phase of building drawings, we're going to use some of those techniques that I taught you guys about earlier, like gesture and the contour, and also the cross contour. Cross contour helps us notice. So for example, I could use a cross contour technique to come up here, and then this here is that one shadow, right, of that one on this side here. See, and I notice that the contour of the shadow also crosses the contour of it matches the contour of that pear going up. I'm also noticing that there's a large shadow up here. You don't have to do it this way, but I find that when I'm blocking in, this has a lot of shadow, and I think that that's one of the powers of the image. When you have something that has this much shadow in it, you're going to want to maybe just kind of create as nice a preliminary map on your page as you can. So now I'm trying to refine it a little bit. And this is where my eraser will come in handy. Also, to remember that I cut this eraser yesterday, or on Monday. Just try to kind of clean it up here. Take your time. You're not in a hurry. It's okay. Right. And then, so this will come down here. There's my bowl. We've got a really nice shape there. Here's now where I'm going to start to kind of iron out the specifics of this fruit here. And it looks like it has kind of a shape like this. Comes up, comes around. And notice I'm kind of being sketchy about it. So like, in other words, I'm being tentative. And I'm not making really dark lines. I'm just trying to get lines that I feel like are dark enough to be distinct, but not so dark that if I need to erase them, that I can't go back in and take them out and erase them. Okay. All right, and then here's the edge of the bowl. Okay. Okay, there's that one. Now this one's a little tricky because some of it is in shadow. But one of the things that you can do here, like if you have your pencil, you can use your pencil to kind of eyeball the angle, right? So if I eyeball the angle on this, and I bring it over here, then I'm like, okay, cool. So I kind of got it more or less about the same, you know, angle. You'll know that if your pear's up here and it's not like this matching, then time to just make a little correction, no problem. Okay. The other thing I'll look at is I'm going to look at how this pear kind of comes up this way on the compared to the bowl, and here's the edge of my bowl, and I notice that this part right there, if I were to make an imaginary line, I have like a little bit of a distance between the bowl there. So if I were to do that same kind of thing, and I have that same kind of thing, that same kind of distance here, that's going to give me a location to put that edge of my other pear there. Okay, you guys see how that works? Same thing with the stem here. Okay, you see the stem. One of the things I want to pay attention to with my stem is how much higher is it than this? Like if I could connect a line from the top of the stem across, what is the angle that it makes compared to that pear? And so if I were to do that on my page, and then I use that same angle, that's going to help me locate here the top bit of my stem. And then here, I've got this nice, that also kind of comes around. I've also noticed that the stem of this round one here is a little bit below. So if I were to use that same angle, right? Same angle, you'll notice this little space right here. That's what I want to pay attention to. So if I get my pencil down like that, more or less, I feel like I kind of got it. It also has kind of a little bit of a shape to it like that. Bring that around. And this also looks like it's kind of coming around like this. So I'm giving a kind of a furry line, but that's okay. That's just where gesture drawing comes in to kind of give you, it's kind of a way, what I like to call sneaking up on the shape, where you're not fully committing to, yes, this is the line. You're just trying to get yourself some generic lines that will slowly but surely start building the drawing into something more substantial later. Okay. I'm going to get this pear up here. If I look at the top of this pear and I just put my pencil straight across, it looks like it intersects the stem. And so, yeah, it looks like my pear is much too high. So if I were to do it properly, I would lower the pear here so that it would come across like that. And then bring it down and around. And so I can get rid of that. So do you guys see how I did that correction? Just using some of the mechanics of the photo that I'm working from. And that's gonna help. And those are the kinds of things that you can do in real life when I'll show you guys citing a little bit later on. Keep in mind that this part right here is the shadow of the pear. So, and some other stuff I want to take care of is I want to get this stem from this guy here. And so in terms of looking like where does the bottom of the stem go, it looks like if I put my pencil straight across, it would come out kind of over here. Okay, so I've got that more or less there. And then I just need to locate it and then kind of match, kind of look and match. It looks like it intersects over here. Okay. Right. And we've got a beautiful little shadow that kind of comes like that, right? Okay. Now, on the bowl, I don't know how far we'll get on this bowl, but on the bowl, there's also some really nice detail. You'll see that there's these little shadows and reflections. And sometimes what I'll do when I have something like that is I'll just go ahead and I'll actually outline. So this is where the negative space technique comes in. And what I'll do is, get this, see better. What I'll do is, you'll see that, well, you can't see it on here, but on the photo, there's these kind of reflections right there. Okay. And so what I want to do is try to approximate those reflections as shapes. And this is where that negative space technique thing comes in, right? They're not going to make sense and a lot of times, like if you guys ever look at something made of chrome or just reflections in general, a lot of times they just don't make any sense, but for some reason your brain is reading it as clear or reflective chrome or a mirror, right? So there's something really kind of fascinating about drawing reflections, because you can just draw these kind of amorphous shapes that are linked to the original, but there is a logic to it. So if you see this part right here, you guys, on the photo in our assignment, you'll notice that there's these reflections up here, and then there's this is what's the reflected shadow from over here coming up. So sometimes there's reflected light and sometimes there's reflected shadow. So I'll try to get some of these, and this is not going to be permanent. All this is doing for me is just showing me a little bit of, I mean, I don't know what this is. It looks like it could be windows. It looks like it could be, you know, sometimes when you're drawing eyes on people, the eyes that you will draw, people will have these white spots. So like in manga or anime, you know, you'll have an eye that kind of, you know, goes like this, and you've got this, you got the reflection and you've got the counter reflection and that kind of thing, like this, right? So I'm just trying to get those reflective surfaces. This is all white, but I am noticing ever so slightly a shift here. Okay, and then also this guy here is a little bit, comes up a little bit more. So look at how much time I spent just trying to get the thing organized on the sheet of paper. Now I feel like I'm ready. Now I feel like I'm ready to start doing the fun part for me, anyways, which is shading it in. I usually start with the medium tones, and I also like to start with kind of cleaning it up a little bit and ironing out the lines that I'm really dedicated to. So I'll just go through and I'll just kind of get rid of the bits that are extraneous with my eraser. I know, for example, that this the stem right there doesn't, you know, we're not going to be able to see what's behind it. And of course, it's going to be much darker going on. Okay. All right. So that's just in terms of composition, that's one way of doing it, using that grid. Okay. Now, I had my other cool pencils, but I forgot where I put them. Oh well. I don't have, this is not the ideal sharpened pencil for me, but that's okay. So now what I want to do is I want to start moving in here, and I want to start creating some of the shadow. And there's a couple ways you can do it. Now, what I like to do is, remember how I showed you guys, I just like to kind of like use a little light touch and just kind of sneak up on the shadow here. So I'm just going to start to begin to get this shadow in. Now, if you look on the photo, you'll notice that over here, there's a reflected shadow. This is a poor print, or not a reflected shadow, a reflected highlight. Okay, looks like I've got to remove this. You guys have any questions, just chime in or tell me to stop or slow down, no problem. Okay, so I'm just using my pencil to get some of the general larger areas of shadow laid in. Now, when I'm doing the shadow, you guys, this is where the cross contour technique come in handy. I know that the pear has this round kind of shape. And so instead of doing like a line like straight like this or like this, what I could do with my shading is I could actually kind of allow the line work that I'm using, the directions of the line work that I'm using to fill it in, to match the contours of the shape that I'm drawing. And what that does is, even though it'll end up being very subtle, it'll end up creating this kind of illusion of form on your pear or whatever you happen to be drawing, because I think our eyes are going to naturally look at these lines as topographical in nature and descriptive in nature. So there we go. I'm trying to get that. I'm trying to get the same kind of energy with that, because you know pears have that kind of funky pear shape, as they say, right? But they have that kind of boop, that little abrupt change. Now this right here, this is going to be a softer edge. So it looks like the edge of the pear, but it's actually just the soft edge between the pear and the other pear, and then the back of the bowl. You can see that that space there in your photograph is quite significant of that big black dark area. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to kind of try to fill in this dark area that I'm seeing. And kind of give it, yeah, just give it a little bit of life. And this is how the drawing goes. So that's why I put 35 to 45 minutes. I could spend hours doing this, kind of therapeutic for me. It just feels good to draw with you guys and just kind of, because usually in the studio, I'm running around helping people do this and that. But what's nice about the online environment is that I get to draw with you guys. So, so you can see how I'm kind of building up the shadow areas. So I'm kind of thinking almost like the shadow areas in the drawing are almost like a territory that I'm trying to fill in. And also they have shapes, and this is where that negative space exercise comes in, because noticing what's not there, which would be, say, like those shadow shapes, noticing those shapes of the shadows helps me do a better job of laying the shadows down onto the page. So even though I know that this shadow here corresponds to this pear right here, notice that it has this kind of like squarish looking shape to it. You guys see that? And that's kind of like what I'm trying to get at, but I'm not going about it as aggressively in the drawing. I'm just trying to more or less, again, sneak up on it. So I'm starting in the core of that shadow, and then here it looks like that the back of that is very, very distinct, and then it slowly becomes less distinct. Okay. Shadow of the back of that pear. You see how I'm still trying to capture the lines that are directional around these. So here I've got this kind of interesting shape that goes like that, right? But I on the photograph, I can also discern that there's these sort of sub areas which are kind of dark too. Now you don't have to do it that way, but what I'm doing is my eye is noticing that, and my pencil is going to try to map that with different pressures. So if I were to kind of do this, I might start up here. Notice that that's much darker in the photograph. And I'll show you a trick too later, later that you can do with the eraser goo to lighten it up. So you see how my lines are mapping this? That's our cross contour technique coming into play right there. And then we've got this kind of beautiful form that comes up this way. You know, it's like this kind of shadow area coming up here, and right. I just gave it that little perimeter, so I knew where to go. Now the bummer about the perimeter, and that's what's kind of bumming me out, but it doesn't really, is that it looks like I just drew a line and kind of colored it in. It's not that big a deal. But it does help to try to get those lines in there. So what I'm doing is I'm just laying in some of that shadow area. And now I can come in here. This is just solid black. So I can just kind of come in here and fill this in with a nice solid black. One of the other things that I promised myself when I was little, I think I told you guys this, was that I hated feeling discouraged about drawing. And I always promised myself that if I started a drawing, just even from my imagination, it didn't really matter. If I was sick of it, or if it had frustrated me to the point where I was just really discouraged, I would just keep going to get to a point where I was ever so slightly less discouraged. And then that would allow me, I would always try to leave my drawings at a point where I felt kind of proud, or at least like it was workable, like it was doable. I tried to never leave a drawing or an artwork totally frustrated, because then the chances of me actually going back to it and finishing it kind of, took a nosedive, which is a bummer, because then what ends up happening is there's a lot of projects, I think, that end up getting left undone just by our own kind of sense of discouragement. Sometimes I'm my own worst enemy in most of the cases. So you see how I'm doing this, guys? I'm just kind of filling in these shadows. And what's beautiful about the shadows is that these are the things that are really defining the dimensions of these different pairs, how they undulate, their different shapes and that kind of stuff. And after a while, you get kind of into a zone, and you're just like, yeah, this is working. I like this. So, and so I feel like I wanted to encourage you guys to take your time with your preliminary drawings, where you organize and you compose the drawing on the page. Okay? And so here, like, look what I'm doing. So I've noticed that there's this kind of shadow that goes like this. And so I don't have to do that exact thing, but by virtue of me noticing it, using that kind of the contour technique, it allows me a little bit of a mental map to follow as I kind of fill in the shadow areas. The other thing too, the mental map, when you do stuff like this, sometimes it doesn't comport or doesn't always rhyme with what you think you're noticing or what you're noticing. And that can be kind of cool, because you end up drawing stuff, and maybe some of you guys have already run into this. You end up kind of drawing something and it's a shape, and you're looking at it, you're like, that does not look like what it is. And then you start to back up and you're like, whoa, that was what it was, right? So that's the difference between drawing what you're seeing and then drawing what you're knowing. Okay. And this guy here, you can see this guy here has a huge, some of this is the pigment of the pear itself, but you'll notice that it's like practically like 1/3 of that pear is in shadow. But some of it too is that kind of over ripening part of a pear. You can almost tell how soft these are to a certain extent. And there's also this sharp little line there. And notice too, like, you can't really see it, but there's this little sliver of a reflected shadow at that very end, which I want to kind of keep in there, because that helps me differentiate it from the pears in the back. And the other thing too, when you're doing your shadows with your pencil or your charcoal, shadows, of course, aren't monolithic. They have different dimensions. They have different densities. And so what I try to do is, the more you look at it, the more you'll notice the different areas of density. It's almost like looking at deep water versus shallow water. They have a different kind of effect, a different color, So this print is mainly here so I can show you guys that kind of mapping of the different areas. And then over here, now this right here, this is a super, super kind of light white color, but nothing is actually super white. And so I'm going to show you a little trick about how you can get some of the get some shadow going. Let me get some of the this pear down here. Okay, you can see this pear here. There's a little bit of a shadow right there that's on the bowl. And then this guy comes like this, and then I'm also noticing that there's some darker areas in here. And that's gonna, again, that's just I didn't do that to figure it out. I did it because I noticed it, but this helped me identify where the shapes were that I should be drawing. And so now what I can do is I can kind of come in here and I can just start to fill in. And I did notice, and if you notice on the photograph, there is kind of a sharper edge there that's a little bit darker compared to the rest. And of course, I have really fuzzy lines. That's kind of just how I draw. I'm kind of a scribbly drawer. I can overcome that, of course, by just discipline and kind of, if I want to make something super, super clean, I can do that too. You see a little spot right there. And then you'll notice right here, right? there's a little reflected area right there, which I want to leave, so I can leave that. I usually don't do that. I usually just I'm doing it for you guys so you guys can see. And then over here, it looks like here's the little nubbins of the flower. Okay. And then here it looks like some kind of a, and it looks like it's something made of chrome, and there's this little kind of highlight spot right there. And so at a certain point, when you're looking at something, I'm sure you guys have had this experience too, as you're doing some of the drawings in our classes, that at a certain point you start realizing like you don't even know what you're looking at anymore. It looks so, you've been staring at it for so long, you know? Okay. And then I've also got this other shadow here, big swooping shadows there, right? And so when I have big swooping shadows, what I try to do is I'll just try to line them up the best I can with just a real light touch. And then of course we've got all the bag, and so if I look at that bag, I can look at some of those wrinkles, and we'll do some fabric studies too, so you guys can get good at drawing wrinkles and stuff like that. Yes. I've got something kind of like this coming up. And so I did notice that there is this kind of it's a very mottled edge around the paper bag or whatever it is that the stuff is on. And then there's also this kind of looks like the edge of a table or something back here. And then that edge of the table kind of comes back over here and meets the top here. So I can even put my pencil down, go, oh, okay, there's my table. And then it goes up that way. Right? And so what's cool about, you know, doing kind of filling in this area is that it ends up giving it kind of a place to live. So, and it kind of it anchors it in the actual on the page. So what I want to do here is I want to try to get, there's also like a bit of a heavier shadow. It looks like there's some kind of multiple light source, and so I can kind of fill this in here too. Now I'm going to go back into this bowl because the bowl is not the way I really want it right now. Are you guys still with me? Are you guys snoozing? All right.
We're here.
Okay, cool. Notice that there's a nice dark shadow coming off of this lower part here, significantly darker than the rest of that pear. And so slowly but surely, what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to map in all these areas. You'll notice this is taking some time, right? And really beautiful developed drawings. I mean, we're so used to seeing people do amazing stuff all the time online. And I feel like drawing has become one of those things where everyone makes it look so easy. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of time and patience, you know, to get good at it, or at least to get good at it to the point where you can enjoy yourself and not feel like you're, you know, that you're not beating yourself up about it, like being proud of yourself. So you can see there's a, yeah. And then back here, it's a bit lighter. And I'm just going to kind of fill this in with some straight lines this way, just stylistically, to kind of give it some. Now there's a whole, now the wrinkles on the page here is a whole nother deal. It's not the end of the world, but really what you have to end up having to do is just draw these little shapes that make absolutely no sense to anybody, and they look completely they're going to look completely abstract. And then also it may end up just looking like a bunch of blobs, but slowly but surely the architecture of those folds will help people understand what you're after. Okay. All right, so there's that. Okay, so that's going to be kind of like, I guess that would be sort of like, I don't know, like phase two or something like that. So I started out, um, I started out, sorry guys, started out drawing, trying to show you guys how to organize the shapes on the page. Then I went in and I started to refine the shapes on the page by using this kind of grid system to get things proportionally relatively correct. Okay, correct meaning that they more or less match what you're drawing, your original source is. Okay. Then what I did is I started to look at, once I had my general, the general shapes in, the general proportions in, then I could start going in and I could start to look at, okay, let's start to make the descriptive marks. The descriptive marks are going to be the marks that are like shadows. So I did that. So now I have the shadow map. Now it's time to start to refine the shadows and start giving some dimension to the shadows. So if you're looking at that pear image, you'll notice that this shadow right here, this one, super, super dark. So I'm going to use my 6B pencil. And I'm just going to come in there and I'm going to give it a little bit of pressure. And I'm just going to go ahead and I just want to fill that in because it is a really sharp, distinctive edge. And this is where the details of this pear are going to come into view. And I'm going to have to go from really hard to really soft right there. Really hard, really soft, pulling out. Right. Go. And then the other thing too is you'll notice like over here on the pear, there's this this kind of shape like that. I'm gonna try to get that really dense shape in there because I want it to really look the part that I'm drawing. So, and the other thing too that's cool about graphite, you guys, especially this soft graphite, is that it ends up becoming kind of shiny. Some people don't like it. I don't really mind it so much. There we go. So right away, that's already making my picture kind of pop a little bit. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing because this shadow right here is also very dense. It's kind of a nice thing to do once you get, the other thing too is sometimes what I'll do is if I don't want to smudge my drawing, because as you build in some of these values, that you're like, if you look at my hand it gets kind of smudged. You can use a piece of paper to put over your drawing so that you don't smudge your drawing with the oils of your hand. And that's another thing. Another thing I did once when I was drawing, when I was doing illustration, is I built a little wooden bridge that I would use to put my hand, it spanned the drawing and went down, and I would pretty much just lay my hand on top of the bridge and draw from the bridge because there was just so much work I put into it that I didn't want to have to go in and, you know, clean it up. And so this is a really, really dense shadow. See how I'm just really, see how I have, I'll show you as I go in a little bit, guys. You'll see that I have some paper showing. I usually just cruise in there and just really try to get that color in there. I'm using little circles, and then also the paper is going to have a texture to it, which you can, you'll see that as I do this, I end up having this kind of almost like I'm dry brushing the edge of the pears, but What I really want to do is I just really want to get some really nice dark shadow. Then I'm going to come up along the edge of this pear here, which is very, 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 very dark and also very sharp. So what's kind of beautiful is what makes I think this photo really beautiful is that it has a combination of very sharp, deep, dark shadow, and then also some very subtle gradations from deep, deep shadow into light. And so here's where this is my mental map again, right? So remember when I drew this shape on that pear there, realize I wasn't in view there. So let me go back. I'm also looking at the relative thickness of the shadow that I'm drawing. So I kind of think of it like a swath of color, and I'm just trying to replicate it. Then of course you're going to have these little bits that kind of come in like that. Right? Now this guy's all in shadow in the back, and so what I could do is I could finish filling that in. But what I'd like to do first, though, is I'd like to finish blocking in some of those really deep shadows. People have different techniques. Sometimes people would like to do the highlights first. I like to do the shadows first because I feel like it really gives the drawing some roots. And so if I look at this image, I realize that there is this kind of strange shape. The shadows, the more you pay attention to the shadows, the more you start realizing that there's sort of regions that have shapes. And that's that exercise of looking at the negative space. So the negative space assignment wasn't just about noticing negative space, but it's one of the easiest ways to get your eye to pay attention differently to what you're drawing, so that you can get it. It's kind of like giving your eye a different point of view, so that you can compare and contrast what you know with what you're looking at. Now, these regions on the pear are not that bright, but that's okay because I'm going to come back in and then I'll show you how we can kind of tidy it up. Now, the pace that I'm going, you guys, that realistically, this drawing could take me at least 2 or 3 hours if I was really going for it. If I wanted to make it look photorealistic, I could. It would just take me a really long time and probably a lot of focus and frustration, but I could do it if I wanted, I suppose, with some, caveats being that might not be perfect, but it'll look okay. All right. And then here we've got like a little bit of shadow coming up. There we go. And then we get the shadow here, shooting across, growing down there. I can finish filling this in here. Okay. We've also got some, so you can see that I'm going to zoom out a little bit there. So you can see it's starting to come together, starting to look a little bit more like the pears in the photo. Don't worry, guys, don't worry too much if it looks perfect. What I really want you to focus on as a beginning drawing class is to find some joy in recognizing the shadows. because the shadows are really, I think, where it's at. It's really, really kind of lovely to be able to see light and to see the shadows and things, and to start to notice what the shape the shadow takes. So I've noticed that on this pear in particular, it is mostly in shadow, not mostly, maybe about half. And so what I'm also doing as I'm going along here is I'm comparing and contrasting the different intensities of shadow that I'm putting down. I noticed that this pear that I just drew here is probably not perfectly, it's not exactly the right proportion, but that's okay. I just want you guys to, I would love to just see I love seeing how people interpret what they're looking at. So I guess what I'm saying. And I feel like that's the best outcome. Not whether or not you can draw photographically, but whether or not you're really seeing the core lights and darks of the subject matter that you're interested in.
Are we allowed to show you the drawings while we're in class so you
Yeah,
can
sure.
critique it? Okay.
Let's take a little break and check them out. Do you want to share? You want to share your screen? Oops. Let me get my mouse. I'll put on the share option. Let's see. I was getting so into drawing. Let's see. Security. Okay. I just want to allow you guys to share too. So. Okay. You guys should be able to press the share button if you want and take over the screen.
Um,
Or
I
you,
don't know how to do that, but can I just show you on the
yeah,
camera?
you can just hold it up. Sure. Oh, that looks great. Fantastic. Look at that. Great job. Love it. Anybody else want to show? I love the shadows. You really got it in there. Really great, Elizabeth. Anybody else want to share their drawing? Kind of hold it up to the camera. If you're drawing along. Okay. Yeah, that looks great. Did any of those techniques help you out at all, Elizabeth, when you were working on trying to get it kind of centered on the page?
Yes, very much so. It did.
Yeah. Yeah, that looks great. It's coming along really nicely.
Thank you. I think the shadowing part is like my favorite part.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. Mine too. Because it almost like you get to a point, I mean, for me, I feel like I get to a point in my drawing where I don't even recognize that I drew it. Do you guys ever have that? I kind of have. Where it's just like it just starts to take on its own life. So. Yeah, I definitely like doing the shadows a lot. So the thing now, in terms of moving forward with the drawing, so if I look generically at the pears, I can start to fill in some other levels of shadow that will again even more subtly differentiate the pears from each other and give the light more of a dimension. All right, bird, we heard you. What's cool is this stem right here is super dark. So I'm going to bring that stem over, and then it has this really light part. So I'll show you guys a trick on how to get this really light part on there. And I just use my eraser. I come in there, I just knock it out. So here's another trick I wanted to show you guys, and that is that off to the side, I'm just going to create a bunch of eraser. I just call it eraser goo or eraser dust. And then the eraser dust, what I can do with the eraser dust is I can gather it like this. I can spread it over here, and here's what I'm going to do. I'll show you what I'm going to do on on the bottom of the bowl. Oops. I take my eraser goo and I'm just going to very gently rub it with my finger. And what that does is it slowly but surely and very softly lightens up any of those shadow areas that you have. So if you feel like you've gone too dark, you can use your eraser goo to come in there, and see how my eraser goo is getting kind of dark now. So I can come in here and I can also start to lessen the intensity of those lines that I had created for the reflections. And then it also gives me a kind of a nice little, very subtle value. Now, in reality, there is no line between the bowl and the background. It's just there. But what I could do now is, like some of you guys did this on your negative space drawings, you can use your eraser, and then you can come in here, and I'm just going to try to start to bring in some of these bright marks there. Are you guys able to see that at all? Okay, that's not the greatest, but I usually what I'll do is I'll draw very specifically the shapes, but I just wanted to show you that's one of the things that you can do to achieve a little bit of dimension in the drawing. Also, you'll notice I'm getting all kinds of smudge marks. The eraser goo is also great for smudge marks. So I periodically will go through and kind of clean up my drawing, you know, just to make sure it's nice and tidy. I usually just take little cleanup breaks, and I do that periodically throughout my drawing. And so now let's pretend I could keep doing this for hours and hours and hours, getting the most perfect, you know, values in the drawing itself. But what I think I want to do is just show you guys a little bit about the detail that you can put in. So it looks like I've got more to go on this guy here, to get him kind of in the, looks like I've got it kind of off a little bit. So I can, there we go, that's a little more like it. And then what I can do is just start to use my pencil to get some of those spots in there. And what the spots of the pear will do will act as a little bit of a visual bridge between the pear's shadows and the texture of the pear's skin. See? And I've also noticed that there's a little kind of a bright spot there, which I'm going to keep. And it's quite dark down in here, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of darken this in. And again, when I'm doing these kinds of drawings, you guys, when I'm doing really extended drawings, the drawing ends up becoming its own reference point. So if I have a really deep shadow like this, I can ask, relative to the blackness of this shadow, how dark is this? Is it dark enough? Well, if I look at the photo, not really. It actually has a much denser kind of a shadow presence that runs up the pear like this. And I kind of blur my eyes a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit, to get the general shape of that shadow. And then again, this, so just as I can compare my shadows, but the depth of my shadows in my drawing, and compare, say, like this shadow here, I can also do the same for the highlights. So I look in my drawing, where are the brightest points? And it looks like there's a really bright point right here on the bowl, which I haven't put in yet, because I wanted to put in that, looks like there's some kind of a silver a silver, like a light gray silver edging to it. Looks like we have some kind of a decorative line coming like this. And then I can use the edge of my eraser here and try to get in there. I usually use my sharp edge and give it a couple little, give it a good hard rub on the edge there, and then I can kind of fill this in. Yeah, it's not showing up as well, but usually what I would do is if I wanted to make a super continuous tone, I would go with a much lighter touch here and just start to notice I was kind of blending using these little tiny circle technique. You could also use the technique where you're kind of going along with the shape, a la, you know, the contour drawing. Another thing too is there's a tendency, I think, for people to want to outline stuff. But if you look at the photo, for example, over here, there is not really a line. All there is a difference in tonality. So there's a slight tone difference between here and the background. And so as the drawing would progress, I would slowly but surely start to eliminate that definite line and start to allow just one value, the value difference from one field, which would be the background, and the value that I'm putting onto the pear itself, to be that line. It takes a little bit of work, but I think once you kind of get the hang of doing that, it really brings your drawings to life, because then it stops being diagrammatic and it starts being more of a map of light. And I think for the last thing I'll do for you guys here is I'll try to get this stem. I think this stem is really pretty. It's a little bit out of focus, but I can give it some life here. There we go. Cool. And then I can get this guy back here. Bring this down so you guys can see. This one's a little bit more in focus. Nice little edge to it there. And you know, obviously down in here in the background, there's a whole nother level of value going on. So then, of course, there's this other little thing here which operates as a counterbalance to this shadow here. So, right. And so I just want to show you guys. I'll go back. Look at how much gunk happened just from my hand. So that's where you could bring in like a sheet of paper and put your sheet of paper underneath your hand so you don't get so much gunk on your drawing like I did. But yeah, just as you look at it, what I do sometimes is I'll look at the entire drawing as a whole, and I'll just assess. I'll take a break. Breaks are really good to take, especially just so that you can get an eyeball on like, well, how much more, where in the drawing do I need to do more development? Where does it need more intensity? So for example, from my perspective, I'm looking at my drawing here. It looks okay, but it definitely needs a lot more shadow right in here. And I can just kind of start to shoot some of that in. And it's a very, very dense shadow there up on this guy here. So this is all, so what I've tried to do in our class, you guys, is what the teacher people call scaffolding. And I'm trying to build skills for you in little bits and pieces, and then build on those skills as we go along. And sometimes like the skills, like for example, the negative space, drawing negative space, like identifying those shapes is really helpful in identifying the shape of your shadow here or even in here. Doing the cross contour is a way of defining and kind of describing a shape on your paper without just using shadow. You can use lines to kind of help the viewer figure out what they're looking at. Okay. So it gets kind of, so you can see this is what you're getting here is a reflection. You can kind of see that it's very shiny. So, okay. And then of course, the one thing that folks usually leave to last is the background. And this is where I find if you guys want, you can use like a, you could use something like this, which is a graphite stick. You can kind of bring it in here, and I'm just gonna. Now, there are some folks who will use the blenders like this to blend in the graphite or their finger. It's up to you. I'm not, I don't really do the finger blend because I feel like I never did the finger blend because I felt like I really wanted to learn how to use the pencils the best way I possibly could. And I kind of felt not that the finger blending was a cheat, but just that it didn't, it ended up hiding all of the work that I had done with the pencil that I was really glad about. And then those micro techniques of using a pencil like in little circles or little lines end up being obliterated by your finger. And for me, when I go and look at drawings or look at art, I really like to see the little bits and pieces of the making of the drawing. I feel like when it's all blended and perfectly smooth and all that, it's just, it doesn't have any of the original kind of life that the artist might have put into it to begin with. So, but that's just me. I'm not going to grade you guys down. If you are a finger blender, no problem. Okay. So I think I've kind of arrived at a point in the drawing, guys, where at this point I've got most of the dark shadows in. I've I kind of walked you guys through how to do the composition, and then also just kind of merging some of our older techniques with the newer techniques um, of the more, you know, the shading and developing value. Okay, and a good and in photography, as with drawing, if you have a nice, if you can think of the value of a drawing, it can be a high contrast drawing, which would be like ink and, you know, like ink on paper, or you could have a continuous tone drawing, which is what we're doing here, which is continuous tone, meaning that there is kind of a pathway from the very densest to the very brightest parts of the image, and there are many grays in between that are nicely balanced. A drawing that is flat, sometimes you'll hear people say like a photograph is flat or a drawing is flat. It means that there's not as much differentiation between the very darkest parts and the very lightest part, and it has kind of a uniform, almost like a gray day kind of a look. Okay. So guys, I'm going to leave it there. I could go on and on for hours and hours, but I'm hoping that was a good guide to help you get some drawings done. And you know, the graphite's going to take a little bit longer. There's just not that much of it. You could also use a graphite stick if you want. The other thing I recommend is if you guys want to use a light pencil to block in, like we did here, for your compositions, for using your charcoal, you could do that too. So, any questions for me, guys, before I sign off? No. All right, so so guys, I'm gonna call it a day, and we're not gonna see each other until March, till the week after next. That doesn't mean I'll be off completely, but if you guys have an emergency or something, a drawing emergency, if there is such a thing, drop me a text or a message in Canvas, and I will definitely get back to you. Okay. So with that, you guys have all of spring break to complete these. These are longer drawings, so take your time, enjoy yourself, and hopefully this will be of aid to you guys when you kind of plug it back in. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna take off. Have an amazing spring break, and I'll see you guys after the week is up. Okay, and good work, Elizabeth. Good work, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks. You too. Elizabeth, if you're still there, do you want to try to figure out the upload thing, or do you want to just try to sort it out separate?
I just asked one of my colleagues if they can help me out with it, so hopefully I can just download them. So please forgive me if you get a bunch of things at the same time.
Okay, all right, that's okay. Yeah, it shouldn't be a hassle. It shouldn't be a hassle. I think so. If they can't do it, then we can Zoom, and then we can just do it separate, and I can work with you to try to get it up. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a great spring
Yeah.
break.
You too. Bye, Elizabeth.
Bye bye.